Abra is a storyteller and author of the forthcoming book, Conquer the Soil, Black America and the Untold Stories of Our Country's Gardeners, Farmers, and Growers. She has spent a whole lot of time in the dirt as a municipal arborist and airport landscape manager. Her work has been featured in publications including the New York Times, Fine Gardening, and Veranda Magazine. Abra is a graduate of Auburn University College of Agriculture and an alumna of the Longwood Garden Society of Fellows, a global network of public horticulture professionals. Her current role is Director of Horticulture at Oakland Cemetery, a revered Victorian garden cemetery in a vibrant park located in downtown Atlanta. That's how I found you. Welcome, Abra Lee.
Thank you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I appreciate y'all coming out on this rainy, warm spring morning. Is it, I guess, kind of warm, a little bit outside. Okay.
This is forward. And it's back.
Forward.
That's a pointer.
Okay, perfect. So, one more? Oh, okay. Can I move this?
Yes.
Okay. Let's get us set up. Okay, we can start here. That's good. The first one was just the title page. Okay. Well, I wanted to start by saying I got into this work of garden history, not at Auburn, but my mother, God rest her soul, was a history teacher. And when I was 27 years old, I was hired to be landscape manager at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And that was crazy that I was so young with such a high profile job. And so I was suffering from imposter syndrome. And it wasn't because I was Black or because I was a woman. It was because I was so young in that role and meeting with these airline executives to discuss landscape and gardening and what bulbs were going to go in. And this time in my life, that was around 2007. So social media isn't nowhere near what it is now. And I didn't have peers I could find that were in a role of airport horticulturist. That wasn't really a thing that I was aware of. And so my mom, as brilliant as she was, this brilliant history teacher, she said, well, do you think you're the first airport landscape manager horticulturist that's a young, Black person, woman? I said, yeah, actually I do. I think I'm the first, And she said, well, who do you think did the airport at Tuskegee for the Tuskegee Airmen? Because they've had an airport there a long, long time. And so something clicked in my brain. I was like, you're right. Of course there was an airport horticulturist there. And there have been airport horticulturists on military bases, all kind of things. And so my background in horticulture is ornamental, so it's decorative. And I say that because once she shared that story with me, she started introducing me to some of the people that you'll meet today. And I would go do talks like what we have to do, and people would be more interested in the people I would sprinkle in than they cared about me talking about airports and plants. And so I said, oh, okay, everybody cares about this. So I started pursuing it more and doing more research, and that's where we are today. And I was fortunate I guess one of my first big publishings was this article I wrote called The Invincible Garden Ladies. You can Google it and find it in the New York Times. It's a short essay that I write about. And actually, the three women I write about in that essay, who are Bessie Weaver, Blanche King Hurston, and Annie Mae Van Reed, you'll meet them today. So with that, besides Auburn and growing up in Atlanta, so when I grew up in Atlanta, my dad was director of parks for the city of Atlanta, and I would spend my weekdays in Atlanta riding around the parks with him, but on my weekends, we go down to Lamar County, Georgia, to Barnesville, if anybody got any ties to Barnesville, and be on my family's farm. And so this is my Aunt Maisie Nell, my Aunt Lily Mae, and then my Aunt Annie Lois. And these women were really the ones where gardening got started for me. It had nothing to do with any type of formal training, but their brilliance and those beautiful country names, I just love it. Maisie Nell, Annie Lois, and Lily Mae. They've all passed on, but their influence to me, these are truly, to me, like the Invincible Garden Ladies. And with the title of the lecture today, we'll get to that part, but it came from a poem that, an essay, I should say, that a Black woman wrote named Lena Williams in the Crisis magazine in the 1920s. So I just wanted y'all to get a little bit of my influence and my inspiration. And it really started in the dirt road country with these rural roots and these women and my mama. These are my grandmother's sisters. So with that being said, though I just told you a story, I like for you to hear people's words in their own words because they have some brilliant things to say. So the gentleman that you see above you, this is a gentleman named William Lanier Hunt, Billy Hunt. Some of y'all may have heard of him, a famous, well-known horticulturist out of North Carolina. And when referencing the black gardeners preserving many rare old flowers, so these heirloom flowers, Billy Hunt said this. It's in the 1950s. When the war was over, and old homes were burned or deserted, their gardens were ruined. But the former slaves had taken cuttings and roots that had come originally from England and the continent, from old Spain, for instance, and planted them in their little plots. They have some magnificent rare flowers. So the they he were talking about I would say, does this pointer work? I'm so scared to press a button and the presentation's gonna disappear. Okay, the middle, it's the middle one. The triangle, okay. There we go, okay, it does work, okay. So this is a woman, you've probably seen this picture, many of you have, maybe not. This is a woman, Aunt Phoebe, Miss Phoebe from Magnolia Gardens and Plantations in Charleston, South Carolina. And she was, the formerly enslaved people were brought back on as tour guides when the Civil War is over. And so the Drayton family, who still owns the gardens and the land to this day, brought them back on. But I say that word, tour guide, with an asterisk by it. So when Billy Lanier Hunt is talking about the formerly enslaved people, imagine two things being truths: the horrors of slavery, but also the love of a plant that you nurtured and gave you possibly some type of joy or beauty. So this formerly enslaved people in the South, going back, these plantations, the South is on fire, burned to the ground, but you go back and get your plants, your heirloom roses, your camellias, your seeds, and that's how these are saved. And Billy Lanier Hunt finds many of them in these rural black areas in places like Mississippi, Alabama, etc. So it's just incredible. But with someone like Miss Phoebe, who would have been a formerly enslaved person brought back on as a tour guide, it's easy to call her a tour guide because she's in a service uniform. She's a dark-skinned black woman. She's wearing an outfit, I guess, made most famous by Aunt Jemima. But in reality, this is a woman who is walking people through Magnolia Gardens, pointing out oak trees, specific native rhododendrons, all kind of spirea and plants. This is a plants woman. This is a woman that really knows her plants. So it is easy to be dismissive of people just by appearances, but I think we have to go back and really look at who plant experts are. And it's not just those that are formally trained. And I say that because the three ladies I introduced you all to from Lamar County, from Barnesville, run circles around me. I could never know enough about plants or horticulture to know what my great aunts knew. So I think we just have to acknowledge who the real experts are in the room. And yes, you can be self-taught and autodidactic, and the most brilliant plant people I know certainly are. And this rose that you see here is called a George V rose. It was a rose that was believed to be extinct, and it was found in an old black cemetery in South Carolina by a black person. So this is where a lot of these heirloom plants ended up just kind of tucked away in these special places. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about what I call folk gardens. Landscape architects would call these vernacular landscapes. So this illustration here is from a book called The Passing On Party by a woman named Effie Graham, a white woman from Kansas. And in this book, it's not even the greatest story, y'all, but the book is about a watch night. Literally, somebody may or may not be making it to the next day. They may be passing on. But what's interesting in this book is an allegedly fictitious story, is that within the first 2-3 pages of the book, she talks about this couple here, Aunt June and Uncle Jerry. And again, saying those names with an asterisk, given context, because at the time, elder black people were not given the respect of the formal titles. So they were called aunt or uncle. They're really not our aunt or uncle. So really Mr. and Mrs. June and Jerry. But I say this because she talks in detail about this garden. I'm gonna read a little bit about that to y'all. And this is not a fictitious garden. This is the same garden we had in Barnesville. So if you really look at this, you've seen this before in a rural area with that wooden log cabin, the outdoor kitchen, if you will, the iron pot on the side, the broom. We just saw that with Aunt Phoebe down in Magnolia, the stepping stones, and then the plants and things like the whiskey barrel. So let me read you a little bit of the description of this allegedly fictitious garden in The Passing On Party. She says, although the house was largely Unc Junk's handiwork, the yard, even to the fence about it, was sure Aunt June's own. To her it owed its wealth of horticultural outlawry and its barbaric decoration. 'Twas she who had begged the plants and flowers and toted them home. 'Twas her hand that planted, watered, and coaxed them into bloom. So this is a garden that's also misunderstood a bit by the author, Effie Graham, because this isn't a barbaric garden. This is actually very well thought out. I'll show you a second picture of it. And she goes on to say this about Aunt June, who is considered the historian in this story. For the fence suited the yard. The first impression on viewing it was a half pleasing, half offending jumble of greenery and gleaming color, of bush and vine, of vegetable and blooming flower, of kitchenware, crockery, and defunct household furniture. A marvelous mixture it was of African jungle, city park, and town dump. So I want to show y'all this picture. So this wasn't a dump. It wasn't an African jungle. This was a well thought out landscape, a potager, if you will. So with that, this is what she's referencing, this fence that is, I would say opportunistic, maybe the design word for that. And it's been sketched out. You can see the cabbage here next to, looks like maybe some iris leaves, some type of perennials and annuals in the front. So that's why I said this wasn't a fake garden. This is actually something that this woman saw. And this was Aunt June's garden. And we think about these rural gardens, or folk gardens as I call them, gardens of the people. They are designed for the designer. They're not designed for our approval. No one else's approval but the person who's living in it. I'll give you a little bit more detail about Aunt June's garden. Effie Graham says this: one noted too the unique receptacles for growing plants. She elevated her darlings in every conceivable manner. Marigolds bloomed in butter kits, and geraniums glowed in punctured dishpans. So we see that too. What we see now is that those things are called sustainable gardens and upcycled and repurposed. And really, they're just rural gardens that were long found in the South and Black areas, and certainly in many of the white areas too. So where they're not sold to Black Americans, they're certainly very distinct to these communities. And I want to introduce you to a gentleman here named Dr. H. Hamilton Williams, Dr. Harold Hamilton Williams. He is a native of Roanoke, Virginia, a graduate of Hampton University in ornamental horticulture in the 1930s. And in the 1940s, he does his thesis. He goes to Cornell University to do his master's and PhD in ornamental horticulture. And this is his thesis. It's called A Study of Landscaping in Negro Communities of the Southern United States. And certainly Negro, the word, when I say the word Negro today, I'm using it in a historical context, just quoting what was used at the time, but Black or African American today. So what's important about Dr. H. Hamilton Williams is he is the first academic to say there is something very specific about these rural gardens, like the fictitious one you saw with Aunt June. And so he does a 10,000-mile survey from Georgia to Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Virginia, to document these gardens in the South. And this is what Dr. Williams has to say. And he has a long, long career, lives into the early 1980s. He says practically every Negro home in the South especially has some ornamental planting about it. An herb may be carefully nursed in a tin can, or a clump of flowers cultivated in a flower bed outlined by a discarded automobile tire. So these gardens are as important as a Japanese garden, as an English garden, as an Italian garden, or a French. You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be your style, but we do have to acknowledge it as a very specific style and a very American specific style, and something that we should be proud of when we are looking at gardens for inspiration. So with that, I want to introduce you to one of Dr. Williams' colleagues. So this is a gentleman named Asa Sims. Asa Sims, he was a gentleman who went to Hampton University as well, in Hampton, Virginia. And he went there to be an artist. But when he was a student, he had a work study job and was assigned to the greenhouse. And he realized, I don't have to paint my pictures to be an artist. I can plant my beautiful pictures. I can plant and create my art. And so he shifts into the world of floriculture and horticulture. So Asa Sims is this gentleman here. This is a picture from North Carolina. And he is teaching in Enfield, North Carolina at the Bricks School. And this is what the reporter who was on hand that day for the class, this is a 2-week course in horticulture of these students on Asa Sims. He is as intelligent as he is enthusiastic, as informing as he is talkative, and as inspiring as he is gracious. His class ranges in age from 18 years old to 70 years old. For 3 short hours, he keeps us wide awake and alert. So in this, first of all, this woman is incredibly wide awake and alert with her hands on her hips, paying attention. I love it. And this so reminds me of even being at Auburn or the classes that you all do, whether you're a master gardener or not, those outdoor classes that you take. And this is their community learning. And one thing I love that the reporter points out is that the classes age range from 18 to 70, showing that multi-generational interest in horticulture and in design. So with that, this is more of his class. And you can see how many women are in the class. And in the article from the Hampton Archives, there's a picture, I don't have it in here today, of the whole class. And I think it's 21 people and 18 of them are women, which is amazing. In this picture, Asa Sims is discussing with the participants in that 2-week course. And these quotes, I should have told you that you see around my pictures, that is either directly tied to the article I got it from, or that's a direct quote from the person, if you noticed that today. So what he's discussing with his class, now he's got his loppers in his hand. They've already talked about the tree. You saw the woman who was there so intently. Asa Sims says to the group, "What do you suggest for this place? How would you arrange the driveway? What do you think of the trees? Should any of them be cut down? Would you leave that out there as a windbreak, even though it is not well placed?" In a semicircle, we stand asking and answering questions and making suggestions. So again, back to rural, not just the rural South, just rural America. This is an intellectual discussion you're having. They're talking about windbreaks. Is it well placed? And again, we just must acknowledge these everyday horticulturists and designers. They're never going to be called designers in the world, but I want you all to feel like that about your own self and know the power that you have and the type of discussion that they are having. And with that, I want to show you a little bit more on his class. So this is Asa Sims again. So now they've gone indoors. These are pictures of plants around the chalkboard. One of the things he was really big on was make use of the things around you, like the automobile tire. It says around the chalk rail at the bottom of the blackboards are prints of roses, asters, nasturtiums, petunias, tulips, and daffodils. These are interspersed with colorful pictures of cottages with landscape yards whose flowers are in bloom. So talking about the petunias, the nasturtiums, the asters, that gives us clues, hints into what plants were interesting and attractive to Black communities during that time. So we know what kind of heirloom plants they were using, and we know what they were using them for. On his chalkboard, it's hard to see. This is a grainy picture blown up, but I wanted to blow it up so y'all could see it. This is what they say. It's 4 things listed on that chalkboard. It says, "Thy kingdom come on earth, make use of the things around you. An appreciation for the beautiful and cultural values make for finer living." So horticulture and gardening to Asa Sims and his class and his students, it wasn't just an art or a science. Cultural values, there was a spiritual connection, and that is also very true for many people, certainly many Black people that do gardening. So I would argue the art, science, and spirit of horticulture for many people who go on this journey, this lifelong journey of enjoying plants. And then finally, this is a woman, we don't know her name, but this is her design in her yard. In Enfield, North Carolina. She was a participant in one of these classes. And I love this picture because she's got her rocks set up here. We would call this a rockery. That would be the name of that. She's got, it looks like a palette here to create vertical interest, to lift your eyes. She's come outside, posed for her picture, her beautiful hat in her lap. And this was from the gardening club. And this was some of the comments that this woman's group made about the gardens that they built in Enfield, North Carolina. They say this: "We turn to the Bible for help and other great books. We have ideas of our own, which often we are afraid to tell others because we think we are so different. No one else needs to be afraid of anyone else. We rejoice over differences and call no one peculiar. We try to make order, symmetry, harmony, beauty, and loveliness. We talk much about beauty and life and loveliness and character. Worship takes on new meaning because life itself becomes more meaningful. So you can just, I feel like I caught the spirit myself reading that. Just see how much spirit and beauty and saying, we don't judge others and things are peculiar. I know how I am the person that's like, don't come to, I literally just told Melanie, don't come to Oakland right now, the roads are busted. So we are a very self-conscious group and a very judgmental group and a very gossipy group, I would say gardeners can be. But I love this thought of inclusivity that these rural people were having and having, again, these intellectual discussions around plants and including what they saw as their spiritual connection to the land. So that's a very beautiful thing. And I think it's a way that we can look at horticulture and not just limit it to those two boxes, as I say, the art and science, which is true, but that can be expanded because it's different things to different people. Now, in terms of the educator, so I want to introduce you to a woman who did a lot of her life's work just right down the road. This is Margaret Murray Washington. Margaret Murray Washington. She's the third wife of Booker T. Washington. I don't want to reduce her life to being the third wife of Booker T. Washington. That's just an easy way to identify her. She was also a classmate of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois at Fisk University, who was the first black gentleman to graduate with his PhD from there and one of the founders of the NAACP. So in 1899, Margaret Murray Washington and Booker T. Washington go on a trip to Europe. And on this trip, they have audiences with the Queen of England at the time. Susan B. Anthony, their good friend, is there. They run into her and, have a nice little banter. But what was most inspiring for Margaret Murray Washington is that they went to a place called Swanley Horticultural School. This was an all-white woman's school in Europe. And the focus and the curriculum was all horticulture. And this was something that Margaret Murray Washington and Booker T. Washington had never witnessed, just women solely focused on a horticultural curriculum. So she was inspired, I wrote a short article about this in Fine Gardening, to bring this curriculum back to Tuskegee. And this is a picture from the book called Working with the Hands, which is the second biography of Booker T. Washington. And this picture is called Outdoor Work for Women. So these are the women at Tuskegee at the time, Tuskegee, Alabama, just down the road. And let me read you this is a 3-semester class, first of all, 3 semesters. So way more than 2 weeks that we just saw an infill. They might as well have been at Abra three semesters, because that was about what I had to deal with. So this is some of their curriculum: a study of outdoor yards, how to utilize and beautify them, trimming and shaping of beds and borders, special treatment of rose bushes, a study of window plants, their value in the home, halls, and public buildings, propagation by layers, cuttings, divisions of roots, and then also landscape gardening, laying out of private and public grounds, roads, parks, walks, and streets. So I took this from the Tuskegee catalog. So that last one, laying out of parks, roads, walks, streets, that's what we call today landscape architecture. So where it is very unlikely that these women went on to be landscape architects, what we do know is that students at Tuskegee were charged with bringing this information back into their community. They understood college was a privilege and not a right. So this is the type of curriculum that they're doing. And though he's not in the presentation today, David Augustus Williston, the first black landscape architect, is also at Tuskegee at the time. And you can see his hand is written all over this curriculum. So these women are really, really getting an exceptional viewpoint of horticulture and all these varying things. And that's me pulling out a handful of things over 3 semesters. They're doing dairying, they're dealing with bees, all kind of things. Entomology is in there. But this is the type of visionary woman that Margaret Murray Washington was. She understood agricultural as this intellectual part of what it meant to be a well-rounded person. When I mentioned the New York Times article in the Invincible Garden Ladies, this is a woman named Bessie Weaver. And she is from Wathena, Kansas, so Tornado Alley in Kansas. And she was or is considered the first black florist west of the Mississippi. And in 1915, at what is called the National Negro League Convention, which is a business convention that is started by Booker T. Washington, she gives a speech in Boston, Massachusetts. So Booker T. Washington, I mentioned him earlier. With Tuskegee, just to give context, he is the first black president of an HBCU, a historically black college and university. So up until before Booker T. Washington, the presidents of Morehouse, Spelman, places like that were all white. And so for him to be appointed at Tuskegee was groundbreaking because it shifted the leadership of these black schools. And I mention this usually when I'm in the North, but I'm gonna say it just because maybe some people don't have context of this. Auburn and Tuskegee are on the same road, literally 15 miles apart, just on the same road. So Bessie Weaver is giving this speech in Boston, Massachusetts. She's the first black florist, as I said, west of the Mississippi. And she is encouraging black women to join this field of floriculture, which has brought her a lot of success. And there are hundreds of people in the audience that day. I think I read it was about 715 people. And this is an excerpt from her speech. It's a beautiful, beautiful, inspiring speech that she gives. And before I read her excerpt, I do want to point out, this is a sample of her work. So what's really hard to find sometimes is the work of some of the people that I talk about. But it's interesting that this is in one of her ads in the paper, this anchor design. You can even see the stargazer lily and roses in the middle. So really exceptional. Bessie Weaver says in August of 1915, "Your flowers grow even while you are asleep, and the forces of nature are in league with you in your endeavor to succeed. When the merchant closes his doors for the night, his income ceases. His stock is depreciating in value. The air and sunshine and moisture and the gentle rain from heaven mean but little to him as an asset, but to the florist they mean much. And even when the florist retires, the buds will burst forth and bloom in the night." So very powerful, speaking to those women, letting them know that, you know, even on a rainy day, ladies, I'm making money because my buds are out there bursting and coming forth. So I love that the power of nature and understanding. I know the man, you know, selling the flour, the sugar at the general store, when the doors are closed, they're closed. But with nature, there's still a reward there. There's still a reward to be had. So Bessie Weaver really rah-rahed up the ladies that day, and I'm sure, I consider her a queen maker, because I'm sure a lot of people left out of there and started their own florist business. I sure would have, after hearing a speech like that. Okay, let me see. There we go. So the second lady I mentioned, the Invisible Garden lady, this is a woman named Blanche King Hurston. Jacksonville, Florida is her hometown. And Blanche King Hurston is here on the left. This is her father, Edward King, and their family friend Gerda Meggs. So the Meggs sisters, Edward King was the gardener for the Meggs sisters, which was a wealthy white family in Jacksonville. And Edward King was also, though he was the head gardener to the Meggs sisters, he was also the manager for his daughter Blanche's flower farm. This is about a 5-acre flower farm that she had in Jacksonville. So with that, a few things I think about with Blanche King Hurston. Number one, her being a legacy child of horticulture and floriculture. Her father was in this business, and she gets into the business, and she, being the first black florist in Jacksonville, but also being wildly successful, she ends up hiring a chauffeur. When she opens up her business, about 800 people in the town come out. That's a big grand opening for a flower shop. And a big band, they call it Shields Famous Orchestra, shows up as well. And she was known for using the natural materials of nature. So if you've heard of Constance Spry, she predates the work of Constance Spry, the famed British floriculturist who very much use parts of nature. So we're talking about the Spanish moss, you know, the native azaleas, things like that. That is the type of materials that Blanche King Hurston would work with. And she also, because there are some Zora Neale Hurston fans here, I'm sure, she is the sister-in-law of Zora Neale Hurston. She married Zora Neale Hurston's older brother, John Hurston. Oops. Let me go back. Sorry. Oh, wait. Yeah, okay, I need to go back, y'all. So anyway, I say that because Zora Neale Hurston, being the famous Harlem Renaissance writer, and a person who was deeply, deeply in love with nature. I'll come back and talk to you all day long about Zora Neale Hurston and her contributions to American gardening. But Blanche King Hurston have an incredible, honestly, an incredible career and an incredible contribution to floriculture. So what you're seeing is a theme of women using plants for their own economic independence and doing quite well with it, and taking ownership of beauty as a quality of life issue and using that in their communities. So Garden Glory, the title of the talk today. This is an essay written by a woman named Lena Williams, who was a Black woman in Philadelphia. And she wrote this essay in the Crisis magazine, which is the official magazine of the NAACP. The Crisis magazine and the NAACP are still active today. So I mentioned W.E.B. Du Bois earlier. I don't have his picture in here. Many of you already know what he looks like, but the Crisis magazine he was the editor of the Crisis magazine. And this magazine was formed as part of the NAACP to fairly critique America during the Jim Crow era, and especially the horrors that were going on in the South. But what W.B. Du Bois was also very aware of is that this magazine was coming into the homes of children, and children deserve to be able to live as children and enjoy life and not have to just deal with hate and pain and just terror every day. So he made sure to include things that would interest them, including poetry and nature, because he was very, very, very interested in gardening himself. So with this essay, Garden Glory, this is how it starts out. This is from the 1930s. And this is Lena Williams' critique of the formal garden. She says, not one of the kind that is stiff, straight, and formal, not one with the grass so vividly green that one revolts somewhat naturally from its artificiality, but one of the type who are so rapidly disappearing, called old-fashioned grandmamas. So that was the kind of garden she liked, the grandmama's garden, the kind of garden I liked down in Barnesville, Georgia. She says, this almost chaotic, irregular, and jumbled grandmother's garden was a patch of Mother Earth pushed out of sight in a corner by a dilapidated, whitewashed pale fence. It set itself up in a triangular form, which added all the more to its strikingness. And we saw this garden earlier. We saw it at Aunt June's house with that dilapidated fence and that beautiful garden in the front. Crowded and huddled back against the crude fence in stately rows were many-colored hollyhocks, tall and dignified. Grandmama had a kink for variety in her garden. For every other bloom against the fence was a sunflower and a hollyhock, the former bold and they're yellow and brown. So Lena Williams is witnessing this garden for real, this old-fashioned grandmama in this elder Black woman's yard. And now this is my interpretation of what it might have looked like, a collage, but grandmama thought this out. This wasn't haphazard. She knew what she was doing with the hollyhocks and the sunflowers. She says, then came some happy marigolds who bloom and bloom and bloom and then bloom some more. Some flags or ladylike iris rushed up to mingle their purple, white, and delicate yellow with the nearby gold. The strong pointed leaves of the iris gave a unique background to the setting. So grandmama is adding layers, interest, drama. We love it, color, texture. Grandmama planted some bleeding hearts with deep rosy red and pink candy hearts on tall, graceful, wand-like stems, something that vied with the early return of robin redbreast and somber blackbird and the sprightly blue jay. So grandmama is a naturalist too. She understands nature and the birds, and they need all of these beautiful parts commingled in nature to create an ecosystem. So grandmama understands that too. So without us saying it, we know that she understands it. And it ends by saying, and this is my Aunt Lois, who younger days in Barnesville, Georgia, you saw her earlier. Life and new life and life again were grandmama's reward for having planted a disorderly, unsymmetrical, erratic, old-fashioned garden. So the reward of planting that garden that's organic to you, that is special to you, meaningful to you for whatever reason. So it is a garden. When we talk about these rural gardens, these folk gardens, they are important to the inhabitant, the owner, as we discussed earlier. It's not so important to the observer. The work I do at Oakland, we are planting for the observer. We really are. Actually, the airport, pretty much any work I do is for the observer, but not all gardens are like that. And that's what I think is so special about so many of the southern gardens. They really are planted for the inhabitant. We don't care what other people think down here in Georgia. Okay. And then there's the idea of the rural peace and simplicity of the country. The countryside, it is rural, it is peaceful, it is simple, but that formal garden where the grass has to be green and every hedgerow has to be straight, that's the power and sophistication of the city. No way is right or wrong. No way is right or wrong. It's just to give you a contrast of what those garden moods might be for you. And then one is fleeting and one is secure. So grandmama's garden is just out here haphazard, having a good old time, living his best life, where the formal gardens, those hedgerows, even in Oakland, there are some things we got to stay on top of on a weekly basis. It's fleeting. We must stay on top of it. So very, very formal. And then what is of value and what is valueless to people? So we talked about Aunt June and her planting her marigolds and dishpans and old butter kits. That was valueless to someone, those old dishpans, but not to Aunt June, not to old grandmama here. She's saying, I want my tires. I want these pieces that anybody else would discard into the town dump, bring them to me, because that's a value. That's what makes and creates beauty for me. And then out of all these gardens, the formal, the informal, the rural, the city, which one is really the most attainable? One of them, you really have to have maybe a gardener present. We have really 8 gardeners at Oakland. And then one, you get to it when you get to it. So that is what Grandmama's Garden would be. And I think it's beautiful that Lena Williams captured that for the children in the Crisis magazine. And we'll return to the Crisis later, but not before I introduce you to the last, who I could call an invincible garden lady from the New York Times. This is a woman named Annie Mae Van Reed of Darlington, South Carolina. And she was a school teacher. And Darlington is right down the road from Bishopsville, made famous by Pearl Fryer, the famous topiary artist, who's still alive today. And Annie Mae Van Reed was a person who grew up on a farm in Cuomo, North Carolina. Her family was in the farming business, very successful, had 1,000 acres. And she planted her own flower garden. And with that, people would come by and just say, oh, can I get some flowers from you? They're so beautiful. And she was very gracious, very generous, start handing out flowers. But then she realized, I got a business opportunity here. What am I doing? So she starts her own greenhouse. And she has a 5-acre nursery and greenhouse in Darlington, South Carolina. It's so interesting when I do this work. I've met people or been in contact with people who remember her from living in Darlington in the 1960s. So this is one of Annie Mae Van Reed's favorite quotes. Annie Mae Van Reed, the florist whose beautiful shop you pass is to the soul of man and woman what the restaurant keeper is to the stomach. And the feeding of the soul is as important as any other kind of feeding. So back to that art and science and spirit of horticulture, this was soul food for her, this flower garden. We love that. And another quote she gave, so this picture is taken from Ebony magazine in the 1949. It is in an article talking about Black floriculturists in America, these really successful Black women. And the photographer and the recorder come and interview Mrs. Reed. And I love this quote of confidence. She says, I knew I was hitting the top when mail orders came from the governor's mansion at Columbia and from cities as far north as Boston. So she knew she was successful. And I always tell people, I'm looking at this picture, she was so successful, she runs and gets her fur coat to take this picture, because you don't need a fur coat in Darlington, South Carolina. You're just showing that you are the queen of Darlington, which she was. But I want to, on a serious note, I do want to show her success. So this is her. This is Annie Mae Van Reed. This is one of her employees at the Darlington Greenhouse. And notice Mrs. Annie M. Reed, florist. Ain't Annie up in here, or Auntie Annie. It is Mrs. Annie Mae Van Reed in her 1940 Ford delivery van. So quite successful. So her flourishing business, this is what I want y'all to listen to what she had. She sold millions of plant seeds. She wrote letters against, during the Jim Crow era, against things like blackface in the papers. In her flourishing business, she offered potted plants, floral designs, artistic emblems. She made baskets. She had preserves, novelty plants. She sold ferns, geraniums, snapdragons. This is just an overview. Dahlias, larkspurs, California poppies, farm products. And she did this throughout the state, as she said, as far north as Boston, because she knew she had made it to the top. So with that, she ran a garden center. Like, let's be real, this just wasn't a 5-acre nursery and greenhouse. This was a garden center for Darlington. And she was actually quite successful. And if you did the math for her earnings in today's money, she would be a self-made millionaire. She really would. She would be about $1.6 million, I think, the last time I checked. So incredibly successful woman here. And I wanted to also introduce you all to not just flower growers, but this is a woman named Bertha Rhodes. Her father started the Philadelphia Tribune, which is still a paper that is published today, a historically black newspaper. And she wrote a garden column for the Tribune. It was called Gardening Gems. And one thing about Bertha Rhodes, so when we think about the contributions of black women in floriculture, in horticulture, sometimes we forget, oh yeah, we did have our own gardening column. We had it all. We still have it all. So we've always done this. There's a saying, we ain't new to this, we true to this, so we true to it. We've done these things for a long time. But with Bertha Rhodes, this was some of her no-nonsense advice that she would share in her column. Rid yourself of the idea that there is something miraculous about growing plants. All that is needed is common sense and a real desire to grow them. And I think that about sums it up with what the work we do in gardening and horticulture and the work you do as master gardeners. And also with Bertha Rhodes, she was an attendee of the Philadelphia Flower Show, which celebrated its 195th year this year. The show was actually earlier this month. March has kind of been long, maybe. But it runs for about 2 weeks. So she is part of a historic garden club called the Our Garden Club of Philadelphia and Vicinity, the OGCPV, Our Garden Club of Philadelphia and Vicinity, which is the oldest, longest consecutive meeting black garden club in the United States. They've been meeting without missing a meeting since 1939. And 2 of their members are on the board of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, which is a very big deal because it is the oldest horticultural society in the United States. So they'll be celebrating 200 years in 5 years. So maybe y'all can take a group trip up there because it's an amazing flower show if you've never been. And also she would do things like suggest for holidays, such as Father's Day, buy the men rose shrubs and plant them in the ground. So I love that she, encouraged getting plants for men as well. And I wanted to introduce you to this woman here. So I brought up Du Bois's name a lot today, and I brought up Zora Neale Hurston earlier as a writer of the Harlem Renaissance. This is another writer of the Harlem Renaissance, and it's very interesting. And I may look into this one day, Melanie, how many people from the Harlem Renaissance were just so deeply interested in gardening and nature and wrote about it and just kind of really collect that. Because a lot of these artists, writers, poets, when you look at the letters they exchange between each other, they're asking about what you're growing and how's your flowers doing. So it's pretty amazing how they have their craft, but they also have this passion amongst each other in their daily life. But this is Ann Spencer, famously of the Ann Spencer Garden and Museum in Lynchburg, Virginia. I've been fortunate to be able to visit there. Shawn Spencer Hester is her granddaughter. She remembers Ann Spencer. Ann Spencer passes away in the 1970s, in her 90s. And she is a Harlem Renaissance poet and also an educator. She's a librarian in Lynchburg, Virginia. Her son are Tuskegee Airmen, and she is very much part of the Black society world. So where her garden is located in Lynchburg, it's halfway between the North and the South. So when people like George Washington Carver or Martin Luther King or Marian Anderson or Paul Robeson are traveling from New York to Georgia or Alabama, they stop at Ann Spencer's house and spend the night. Can you imagine Beyonce or, Michelle Obama just spending the night at your house? That's basically what this lady's house was like. So Ann Spencer in 1927 writes this letter to W.E.B. Du Bois, who I talked about earlier as the editor of the Crisis magazine. And she is sounding the alarm about a woman who is another Harlem Renaissance poet that she's a great fan of. And she's saying, hey, her work is excellent, and I think this needs to be more formalized. Ann Spencer says this in December 1927 to W.B. Du Bois. But why, for the sake of little Negro children, don't you have Effie Lee Newsom put some of her lovely stories, bits of charming information, in verse into slender books for our grade children? I work here in the library and know at firsthand the dearth of such material. Many places they be used as textbooks. No one can be taught preciousness and beauty after his maturity. And she also mentions in the letter to Dr. Du Bois, take a tip. There's money in it. So I love the women telling the men what's gonna be what with this on the business end, like, don't be a fool about this. So she was writing a letter about this woman. This is Effie Lee Newsom. And Effie Lee Newsom was where W.B. Du Bois was the editor of the Crisis magazine. She was the editor of the children's pages. So Lena Williams, people like that, where you saw part of the Garden Glory essay, would make their submissions to Effie Lee Newsom. And in hip hop, they have a thing like your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. This would have been your favorite poet's favorite poet. So Effie Lee Newsom would write these beautiful poems in the Crisis magazine. She was considered an eco-poet, a nature writer. She attended the Philadelphia Academy of the Arts. She attended the University of Pennsylvania. She attended Wilberforce. So she's a very accomplished Black woman. She was also a librarian and a teacher, loved writing for children. And this is her most famous poem, which appeared in the October 1922 issue of the Crisis magazine. It is titled The Bronze Legacy, dedicated to a brown boy. "'Tis a noble gift to be brown, all brown, like the strongest things that make up this earth, like the mountains grave and grand, even like the very land, even like the trunks of trees, even oaks to be like these. God builds his strength in bronze, to be brown like thrush and lark, like the subtle wren so dark. Nay, the king of beasts wears brown. Eagles are of this same hue. I thank God then I am brown. Brown has mighty things to do." So what Effie Lee Newsom does in 1922, again, the Crisis magazine is a critique on Jim Crow. She understands the call to action by Du Bois. Children are reading this. And so with that, she knows it's not just Black and brown children, it's also non-Black and brown children reading it. And she wants to show the power and the beauty of their color in nature. And so she is intentional to use the word brown and compare the only thing that's so beautiful to your skin is Mother Nature itself, the oak trees, the eagles, the thrush and lark, the dark birds. So it's a very powerful poem, and the way that she uses it, so it counters the blackface, which is a completely false and derogatory narrative, but it is very uplifting and very beautiful and inspirational, and that is the type of person Effie Lee Newsom is. And I've been very lucky with my research to meet descendants. So I've met Ann Spencer's granddaughter, and I've met Effie Lee Newsom's niece. Effie Lee Newsom also lived into her 90s in the 1970s. And so Jerry Lee Mitchell, who I now consider my friend, told me that, her grandma, her aunt, this is her grandfather's sister. They would sometimes go out to the coast of New Jersey. So they're from the North. Effie Lee Newsom grew up in Philadelphia, Ohio, and Texas. And she did live in Alabama for a time. She lived in Montgomery and also Birmingham. But she talked about she would pick up shells from the ocean and listen to them and talk about them. And she was the type of woman that would say going and coming. She was very articulate and enunciated all of her words. So it's interesting to talk to people who knew them in real life that are still alive today that can discuss their work. So with this, Ann Spencer has written this letter sounding the alarm to Du Bois. This woman is an incredible poet. What are you going to do about it? I hope you get a book started. And indeed, 1941, Gladiola Garden is released. And this is a book that was re-released in 2021. So you can order it as a paperback now. It is a collection of Effie Lee Newsom's poems. Not all of them appeared in the Crisis, but many of her poems. It's about 100 and maybe 60 something poems in there. Beautiful, beautiful poems. It is, in Gladiola Garden, that was an essay she wrote for the Crisis. And again, she, you'll see in a minute, but she compares the various colors of gladiolas to the various colors of Black and brown children. So even here, you've got this dark-skinned little Black boy or a lighter-skinned little Black girl, coarse hair, bulbous nose, full lips, adorable, adorable. Not created as a caricature, but created beautifully during a very dark time in the United States in the Jim Crow era. Now, with Gladiola Garden, Effie Lee Newsom wrote it, and this is the woman who illustrated it. This is Lois Mailou Jones from Boston, Massachusetts, who also started the art department at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She studied in Paris, she studied in Haiti. These are some of her pen and ink drawings that are inside of the Gladiola Garden book. So if you don't have a Lois Mailou Jones in your house right now, you're not gonna get one because it's very expensive art now, very expensive. Her art sits in the National Art Gallery, so I hope that you do. And she was also, Gladiola Garden, this work was also the inspiration. I mentioned the Philadelphia Flower Show, and this year being the 195th year in 2024. In 2022, I was fortunate to teach a course in Black garden history to the graduate landscape architecture students at my alma mater, Auburn University. And we did a garden called Mixed Shades, Much Joy, based on the work of Effie Lee Newsom. So here are two of the attendees of the Philadelphia Flower Show reading about the life and legacy of Effie Lee Newsom. The reason we chose her is because she was born in Philadelphia, and when she was married and became Newsom, married to Reverend Newsom, she spent time in Alabama, a considerable amount of time, and her mother was from Mobile. So these were 9 students, 9 graduate landscape architecture students, 8 from the South, 1 young woman from China. All students were non-Black, so 8 white students and 1 young woman from China. And I wanted to make sure that they felt connected to the work of Effie Lee Newsom, and that we didn't just pull her work and try to make it from a place of pain or darkness. Effie Lee Newsom wrote in a vivid way. She wrote beautifully. And so we decided to make sure that the garden expressed that. So what the students did was create these viewfinders. Again, there's landscape architecture students. And when you look through these windows, you see the poems of Effie Lee Newsom in the flowers. And you can't see this here, but the viewfinders are at different levels because adults, and certainly Effie Lee Newsom was writing to the children. So he's looking out over the landscape. You can see him looking through one. And then this is what you see. Things like this. Oh, little girl, oh, little boy, in gardens of mixed shades, much joy. One really has to think of you, for you are many colors too. So that was the Gladiola Garden poem, or an excerpt from it, where Effie Lee Newsom is comparing the various colors of gladiolas to the various shades of brown. And I am proud to say that this is me with Tyler, Alex, and Trey. This is Trey, I'm sorry. Trey, Alex, and Taylor. Taylor's from Evergreen, Alabama, and Alex and Trey are from Birmingham. So the students, that's me holding a copy of Gladiola Garden, the paperback copy that exists, my prized possession in life. I don't know why I didn't bring it, Melanie, but next time I see you, I'll bring it. I have an original copy of it, the hardback. It's beautiful, it's beautiful. The students won 5 awards, including a gold medal at the Pennsylvania Horticulture Society Philadelphia Flower Show in 2022. So this was a big deal for them. These students from Alabama winning, competing against people who are for real landscape architects 30 years into their career. So I said, welcome to the top, y'all. Like, get your champagne, enjoy this moment, because it feels good to win. And we ran up there like the Price is Right and got our award, and that's Alex holding it. And we were the only group competing from the South as well. So that was super special to go up there. The students were mostly from Alabama, but one was from Georgia, one was from Memphis, Tennessee, and of course, Vera from China. And they all worked on this, so it was a really big deal. And I have to acknowledge Associate Professor David Hill, who brought me in, who was their landscape architecture professor. So I wanted to show the totality of, yes, I do this garden history research, but this is how we bring it into the present day through these displays. And one of my classmates from Auburn, Morgan, I forgot Morgan's last name, is the director of the Arboretum at Auburn. So we've been having a conversation to reproduce Gladiola Garden as a permanent exhibition at Auburn, which I'm here for it, I am. So as I wrap this up today, okay, good, we're good on time. Thank y'all. Just a few things. This is what I want you to take from this. This isn't just Black garden history. This isn't just American history of women. These are love stories. I told you, Effie Lee Newsom lives into her 90s, and Spencer does too. Bessie Weaver has a long 40-year career in floriculture, and same with Margaret Murray Washington, a queen maker on her own, teaching young women these skills, or making sure, she may not have been teaching it, but she's making sure they get the skills of landscape architecture and entomology and floriculture. And then people who are overlooked, such as Aunt Phoebe at Magnolia, or allegedly fictitious Aunt June, which we know that was really her garden. So there's a lot of love that's poured into the work of horticulture and floriculture and gardening. And that is how I look at the work of Conquer the Soil, the research and writing I do, and the book that I am working on as a book of love stories. So with that, I thank y'all so much. And if you have a story that you'd like to share, I'm certainly all ears. That's how I found out about many of these things, is word of mouth. Everything ain't on Google. Y'all are well aware of that. And it's sometimes just wonderful to talk to everyday people who can share some wonderful stories from their hometown. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a joy. And Melanie is going to take questions. So I think you have a microphone. Do you want me to just repeat the question? Okay.
Anybody has questions, just ready? Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
What we gonna? You said when Jason's here, I'm gonna come back. Yeah, to hang out. I'm gonna come hang out with y'all.
Yeah, we'll have her back for sure, hopefully.
Y'all come visit me at Oakland Cemetery. Yep.
Abra has so many stories. A lot of us have listened to a lot of her podcasts. I will recommend one podcast. The way I really kind of, Deborah and I, some others here found you was with Joe Lample.
Yes, Joe.
That was my first introduction to conversation. Otherwise, it was when we had the Arctic Christmas freeze.
Okay.
And you did the video with Oakland.
Yeah.
That's when I realized Sarah had retired.
Yes.
And you lost so many plants.
Yes.
And lost all the rosemary, which
Yep.
most of us did. The greenhouse suffered huge damage. What's going on at the greenhouse?
So with the greenhouse, what we have decided to do is turn it into what is considered a third space. So we have emptied everything out of the greenhouse and we're ordering furniture. There's a Petersham's Nursery, I believe is what it's called in Europe, in the UK. And so it's a old greenhouse that they turn into, they put the sofa in there and, you know, the chandelier. So we're making it a nice hangout spot that hopefully the Georgia film people will want to use and get us some money. And y'all too, of course.
For the Oakland.
Yes.
Oakland.
Yes. So it's going to be a beautiful spot that anyone can use at Oakland. Yep.
Well, you have so many incredible stories, but if you could just share real quick how you decided to change your major.
Oh, to horticulture?
That's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay, so what Melanie is referring to, I didn't go to Auburn with a plan. I was 18. Auburn to me was an hour and a half from my parents' house in Southwest Atlanta. So it was across the border, across the state line. So it was just far enough, just close enough. And I kept changing my major. Just I couldn't find that fit because I would be in these classes with 300 people, seriously, in these auditoriums, no windows, and I just felt trapped. And one day I was on the Tiger Transit, that is the bus at Auburn, and there were these students outside with their clipboards, just sitting under a tree in the fall, beautiful 70-degree day. And I was thinking, what are they doing? There's an outdoor class. And I found out that those were the horticulture students. And so I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I signed up for it. And that was it. That's how I got into horticulture. It's like no rhyme or reason. Their life looked better than mine at the time.
Years of aspiration.
No.
That's right.
I was like coming to the end of my second year. I had to make a decision quick. So that was that.
I love that story. Thank you, Abra.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book on soil?
Sure. So the book, so I don't mean to confuse. The book Conquer the Soil, the words come from W.E.B. Du Bois. And literally the three words conquer the soil. So he wrote a book called The Souls of Black Folk. And in it, he talked about the three gifts that the enslaved Africans brought to the Americas, which was the gift of story and song, so that, or, the preacher man, things like that, song, the Negro spirituals, the gift of spirit, so just that deep belief Black communities have in a higher power, and then the gift of strength and brawn, which he described as Black America's ability to conquer the soil. So the agrarian work, the agrarian gifts that the enslaved people brought, that's what Conquer the Soil is in reference to. But in the book, so you will see many of these people in the book, not all, but certainly most of the people you saw today. The difference with the book is that I mentioned earlier that Margaret Murray Washington was a classmate of Du Bois and that she was the wife of Booker T. Washington. What you see in the book is the interconnectedness. So many of these people knew each other in real life. So not all of them, but what it started out as a book of individual profiles, just Asa Sims and his story, H. Hamilton Williams and his story, it has fortunately become narrative nonfiction. So you see the dynamic between them and the people that they interact with versus it just being these simple profiles. So that's what's the difference with the book Conquer the Soil. It's a through line through it versus this separate, square boxes that I had put the people in. But I think it's going to be an exciting read. I think it's going to be fun. I think that it is something that y'all will be really proud of. And I think it's time to really share some more American horticultural stories. It's not all about Europe and their great legends of horticulture. We got some legends over here. So that's what I hope that you take from it. So thank you for your question.
Any more questions? You sure? Here's your opportunity. There you go.
Yes, in the back.
Any research, it seems like there's always something that you can't quite find, or maybe the research isn't there. Is there some point for some person you're still looking for specific
Yes, the question is, with any research, it's always something that you can't find. So I can think of one just off the top of my head you're asking. There's a gentleman named Joel Cooley who was an award-winning dahlia grower, and he won all these awards at Madison Square Garden in the dahlia contest. His mom grew flowers. He got the inspiration there. And I've really struggled to find a picture of him. The one picture I found, it might be his brother, but the Historical Society in Staten Island, New York said, oh, but we think it probably is Joel Cooley. We're not sure. So it's not just him. There are a few people that their pictures, I have a better picture of Asa Sims. I just didn't, I didn't have it in the presentation today. There are a few people that we may only have their illustration from the time that they lived in. We don't actually have a photograph. So that is one thing that I don't want to say I've struggled with. 99% of the people their picture will be in the book. Another thing though, H. Hamilton Williams, who I mentioned, did not talk about this today, but he was the advisor to what was then called the Negro Garden Club of Virginia. So this is this huge collective, thousands of mostly black women, but black people who had a organized formal garden club constitution that paralleled the Garden Club of Virginia. And I say that because they write a book. It's called The Handbook of the Negro Garden Club of Virginia. It's passed out at their 10th anniversary. And on the first page of the book, and I've only seen one copy of this book, y'all, one copy of my life, and it's at the AU Center, the Atlanta University Center, in their archives. So if you have this book in your house, hold on to it with your life, because no one ever sees this book. But my point is this, H. Hamilton Williams, at the forward of the book, Eleanor Roosevelt writes a letter. She's like, she says, my dear Dr. Williams, a very warm salutation, my dear Dr. Williams. And she's congratulating these black women in Virginia on their work, and it's signed Eleanor Roosevelt. And I've never been able to find that smoking gun. I'm like, how did he know the First Lady of the United States to write a foreword to her book? That's, again, I mentioned Michelle Obama. That's like me saying, yeah, Michelle Obama wrote the foreword to Conquer the Soil. So something like that is a big deal. And I've reached out to all kinds of universities, and we can't find that smoking gun, but that's what research is. There's going to be somebody 60 years from now that finds it. And, we'll be in heaven, but hey, it will be answered one day. So thank you.
Anything else? No other questions? Okay.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
What I wouldn't give, and a lot of us in this